It's good to be here with you all. Now, my title was kind of given away there. It was Being Made Whole, and many of you who are preachers and teachers, you start to learn that when you come up with when God places on your heart a topic to speak about, He will put you through it, right? Legend? Agreed? So being made whole. This week I got sick. I need to be made whole, so pray for me. I got sick, and then the other day I was thinking, it's been a while since I've been injured. I don't know why I thought that. Been playing less sports, been more busy coaching, haven't been playing basketball as much, and I thought, it's been a while since I've been hurt and been injured, since I hurt my knee and had surgery. And the other day we were leaving a family member's house, and I misjudged the bottom step, and I fell to the ground and rolled my ankle. So, talk about needing to be made whole. God puts you exactly through the circumstances in order for you to prepare for your message or for your teaching. And it's exactly what I'm going through. It's an honor and a blessing to be back here. Melvin, do you mind just turning the cane down? Thank you. It's an honor and a privilege to be back here with you all. For some of you who don't know me, because every time I come here, I see new faces. And unfortunately, due to lack of time, I don't have enough time to sometimes introduce myself. My name is Alex Thomas. My wife is Christina, and she's still Christina Paul. We're working on getting it changed to Thomas. She's still in denial, but we're working on it. Because of the immigration, we have to wait for all that stuff to get cleared. But I grew up here in this church, maybe not in this building, but with this family of believers. So it's good to be back. God has us in Atlanta right now and doing amazing things with us and through us, and He's using us simply just as His vessels in ministry. And when you make a big move like that, you tend to wonder a lot of doubts and fears, which I'm sure many of you can relate to, coming here to Canada. But thinking about how God can just simply use you. And God has Christina working in a medical lab over there close to the city, and He's blessed me with the job working at a Christian school. Some of you know I worked at a Christian school here in Mississauga. I was working in the marketing department. And when God brought me over there, and I cleared the immigration and all that, and opened up a wonderful opportunity for me to teach 6th grade Bible and to coach basketball and soccer. Now, a lot of you who know me for a long time, you know that is kind of like an ideal job for me, right? Coaching basketball, soccer, but better yet, having the opportunity to teach 6th grade Bible. I teach 90 kids in 4 different classes every single day, God's Word. And it's a tremendous blessing that my Bible is my textbook. I don't need to know science, I don't need to know math, I don't need to know anything else but learn and teach God's Word every single day. So it's a huge blessing. He's using us there in our church, but at Bible Chapel, we're plugged in, serving, and life is going and busy, but it's amazing how God takes circumstances and He utilizes it for us to change, right? Some of you who have known me for a long time, when you see me, it's funny, every time I come back, I always get this comment. Oh, married life, it's good, right? Pointing to my belly. It's grown and it's changed, and I've changed. Some of you who don't know me wouldn't maybe not realize that. Hopefully I've changed in more ways than just my physical self. Hopefully I've changed in the man that I am, and who I am spiritually, who I am as a person, as a man after God's own heart. But hopefully you see change. And that's kind of the gist of what today's topic is about. If you could turn with me to John chapter 5. And we see here a story which I'm sure many of you have read multiple times. Coming to the pool of Bethesda. And I think my dad mentioned that he may have spoke on this topic quite recently, which was not planned. I didn't know. So I hope I'm not overlapping with anything that he said. He didn't share his notes with me. This is all on my own. It's funny because I didn't know how it would be being a visiting speaker. I've never had the opportunity to travel and speak, and when you come home, you're so busy with things, seeing people, meeting people, spending time with mom and dad. And I was talking to Dan Roberts, many of you know him, yesterday, and I said, it's just been challenging finding time this week to prepare in the midst of being here, back home, and seeing people. And he said, well, why don't you just, take one of your messages that you spoke in Atlanta and use that here? And I said, well, that would work, but the only problem is the messages I spoke in Atlanta were all the messages I spoke here before I left. This is fresh, hot off the press, new stuff. Dad didn't give me any notes. But if you're in John chapter 5, we could read from verse 1. It says, after this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now he came from Cana in Galilee. That's where he healed the official son in the previous chapter. So now he's gone from Cana in Galilee over to Jerusalem. And verse 2 says, now there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool. So Jesus had to go to the sheep gate. And what happens at the sheep gate is where they bring the sheep that is being sacrificed at the altar. And isn't it amazing how Jesus came to the sheep gate? The sheep that would be sacrificed for our sins came to the sheep gate. And so, as we keep reading, it says, the sheep gate, a pool in Aramaic called Bethesda, which has 5 roofed colonnades. In these lay a multitude of invalids, some blind, some lame, and some paralyzed. One man was there who had been invalid for 38 years. And when Jesus saw him laying there and knew that he had already been there a long time, he said to him, do you want to be made whole? Do you want to be healed? The sick man answered him, sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up. And while I am going, another steps down before me. And Jesus said to him, get up, take up your bed, and walk. At once the man was healed, and he took up his bed and walked. Now that day was the Sabbath. So the Jews said to the man who had been healed, it is the Sabbath, and it is not lawful for you to take up your bed. But he answered them, the man who healed me, that man said to me, take up your bed and walk. And they asked him, who is the man who said to you, take up your bed and walk? Now the man who had been healed did not know who it was, for Jesus had withdrawn, and there was a crowd in that place. Afterwards, Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, see, you are well, sin no more, that nothing worse may happen to you. And the man went away and told the Jews that it was Jesus who healed him. And this is why the Jews were persecuting Jesus, because he was doing these things on the Sabbath. But Jesus answered them, my Father is working until now, and I am working. So we come to chapter 5 here, and we see the story of an invalid man. We don't know exactly what is going on with him. We don't have any prior context to his life. We don't know what he's been through, what his family circumstances were. We don't know that, but what we do know is that he was invalid. It could be that his legs were not working. Maybe he was one who was blind or lame. He had been dealing with this for 38 years at this point. We don't know if he had anything previous to that, anything else that led up to this, pre-symptoms, anything like that. We don't have a full diagnosis, but we do know that he had been dealing with this for 38 years. And, so we come to the concept and the question that Jesus asked him. Do you want to be healed? And so the 3 points I have for us today, I'll just go through the 3 points, tell you what they are, and then we'll kind of go through them. It says, our first point is our need to be made whole, our fear to be made whole, and our hope to be made whole. So we have a need, a fear, and a hope. And my desire as we sit here and we take in what God has for us today, that don't think about the person who's sitting next to you, or the person who is in front of you or behind you. I want you to think deeply into yourself. And the two words that I have really been struggling with throughout coming up with this and writing and getting my notes down is change and brokenness. Change and brokenness. Some of us are broken. Some of us are being changed. But I really want you to think to yourself where you're at. I want you to do something. Now, I used to do this a long time ago. Some of you remember my first message. Comes up often. Something I made you all say. Wax on, wax off. I don't know. Some of you still remind me of that. But I want you to look to your neighbor. Look to your neighbor. I want you to say, what's wrong with you? Look to your neighbor. Say, what's wrong with you? Come on, everyone. Now, some of you husbands and wives may have said this to your spouse this morning. What's wrong with you? Some of you parents, you may have said it to your kids this morning. What's wrong with you? But I want you to really think to yourself, what is wrong with you? What is wrong with you? Sir Isaac Newton, the first law of motion, as he's written many laws of motion, the first law states that everything continues in a state of rest unless it is compelled to change by forces impressed upon it. Everything continues in a state of rest until it is compelled to change by forces impressed upon it. At different times, I think we all recognize within ourselves the need for change. Now, we all might recognize we need to change. Yet we also recognize that the change we need is often too hard to achieve. And this is exactly the place where this man is today. Now, as I said earlier, some of you may see me. And when you see me every week, when I used to come here every week, you might not see any change in me. But after having left and come back maybe every 4 or 6 months, you can notice my change, right, physically. Now, God has impressed on me the same way Sir Isaac Newton says here, everything continues unless change comes by force. Does that make sense? So change came in my life, changing circumstances of my surroundings. I left Canada, I moved to the States. I was in the North, now I'm in the South. It's completely different. My career has changed. I'm not in business, I'm in education. My status has changed, I'm now married. All these things have happened to me to impress upon me a change that God needed to do in my life. And the place where Jesus came at this point was to this man for 38 years had been living here. Been staying by this poolside, waiting for the waters to be stirred, waiting for his opportunity to step into it, to be healed. But the question that Jesus asked is, do you want to be healed? It wasn't anything like, can I help you get down? Can I do the healing for you? Is there anything you need me to do? What is wrong with you? He didn't ask any of that. He simply asked, do you want to be healed? And so the first point is our need for wholeness. And I think that many of us might realize the area in which we are broken and the area that we need change. But what happens is we become too comfortable in that brokenness to really see our need for change. Does that make sense? We are too comfortable in our brokenness to actually really want the change. Because what's his response we see? When that question was asked, do you want to be healed? It's a yes or no question. It doesn't require any other type of analysis but yes or no. But he doesn't answer the question. He says, do you want to be healed? It's the end of verse 6 and the beginning of verse 7. Do you want to be healed? The sick man answered him, Sir, I have no one to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up. And while I'm going, another steps down before me. His answer was not yes or no. His answer was, I can't get to healing. I can't get to healing. I can't get there. What he's dealing with here is self-pity. There's two things that we need to recognize in our need for wholeness. The first is self-pity. The second is self-pride. So let's talk about self-pity real quick. He had a pity on himself I need to be made whole, but I can't do it. I need to be made whole, but I can't do it. How many of us actually enjoy going to the dentist? Now, I know we have some dentists here. Yeah, Uncle raised his hand. He is the dentist, of course. We have some dentists here. They probably appreciate going to the dentist, but some of you, many of you, maybe don't appreciate it because it hurts. It hurts to go to the dentist. See, we have a need to go to the dentist. It is for our hygiene. It is to be hygienic with our mouth. But we don't look forward to it because we know the excruciating pain that comes because we neglect to floss every day. We neglect to brush our teeth when we need to. And so with that comes the consequences. I dread going to the mechanic. I don't like it because they always want to sell you something you absolutely do not need. I do not need a cabin filter. I do not need air in my tires. Just do my oil change. But what happens with the state of being in brokenness for so long is that you lose hope. You lose the desire and hope to be made whole. Now, we can become so comfortable in our brokenness that we forget. In our self-pity, we forget that we can actually be made whole. And I think that's the state that this man is in. That he says that I have no one. I have no one to take me to the pool. I have no one. And such is the state when we are losing hope and we are so close to a solution, but we can't get there. Some of us are just comfortable in our misery. And I feel like that's what this man was as well. He was comfortable in his misery. In his self-pity, it brought a certain level of comfort. That he would rather be this way than to change. And I've been there too, and I am there. That I am so comfortable in my way and in my brokenness that I don't want to change. For 38 years, he had lived with this. And in some places in the world, actually being invalid is a way of business. Beggars, right? We see people who are in need in different parts of the world, even here. We see people who need help. And you see, when you get it off the highway, there's a guy holding a sign saying that he's homeless and he needs help. And imagine all the money that he can get by doing that job. To the point where he would even have enough money to be self-sustainable. But he will probably continue to do that job because it is where he's comfortable. So in his self-pity, it has brought a certain level of comfortableness in his misery. And that's where this man has been for 38 years. He has not chosen to take a step to change his surroundings. It would remove his security of being that man who's invalid for 38 years. So the answer to his question, do you want to be made whole? Well, I have no one. I have no one to bring me into this state to make me whole. So I'm just going to sit here. And I think that is so relatable. I think it is so relatable to where we are. Many of us can identify the areas of our life that need change and the areas that are broken. But the fact of the matter remains, some of us would like to state it. Because of the excruciating pain that it would take, the uncomfortableness that we have to endure to actually go through the process of change. It hurts, but it is to make us better. So not only our need for wholeness, but our fear to be made whole. And I think our fear to be made whole often comes from the fact that it doesn't look the way we want it to look. So for example, we see other situations in the Bible. Now, Jesus has healed many other people. We think of the woman who came to him with the issue of blood. And as she held on to his cloth, onto his garment, and he turned and he knew that someone had touched him, right? And he sees that something had left him, and his disciples were saying, well, there's so many people here, obviously someone touched you. And he said, no. Someone touched me, and someone held on to me, and power left from me. To the point where the lady who did it, who was looking for her healing, she knew she couldn't escape that situation. She knew she couldn't escape the situation. So she stood up and she exposed herself and said, it was I who held on to you. Because I had faith that holding on to you, it would heal you. And his response to her was, your faith has made you whole. He blessed her because of her faith. And we see that again with the 10 lepers. Right? We see that with the 10 lepers, that 10 of them came with faith knowing that they could be healed. And one turned around and gave thanks, and he said to him, your faith has made you whole. But here in this story right here, there is not a single notion of faith being mentioned. We know nothing about it. He didn't even know who Jesus was, right? He didn't even know who the man was that healed him when they asked him later on, who was it that made you whole? And he said, well, I don't know. He left. To think that Jesus didn't even mention this man's faith, and we've seen examples previous to this of Jesus healing those because of their faith. And the bottom line is this: our fear comes because it doesn't happen the way we might perceive it to happen. Now, if we think that those two situations, the woman who had the issue of blood and the 10 lepers, they were healed because of their faith, by that virtue of that, we have this calculation in our mind, well, I need to follow these steps because in the Bible, these steps is what led to someone being made whole every time. Right? So we would have this calculation that this is how Jesus works. Now, I'm not saying that faith isn't going to help you, or it's not going to make you whole. I'm saying that that step alone isn't what's going to lead you to your wholeness. Because in this situation right here, Jesus heals a man with no regard for his faith at all. And so when we come to the point of needing to be made whole and Jesus works in our life, and we say, if I go to church this week, if I pray with my family, if I do my devotions, I will be made whole. I will be successful. I know for sure when I was in college, when I was doing my degrees, exam time, I was a really good Christian. I know many of you can relate. Came to exam time, I was front row, I was doing my exhortations, I was doing my devotions, I was praying every day without ceasing, ready for my exams. I'd write my exams, knowing that I had followed the right mathematical equation to be successful, and the mathematical equation was to live a good, righteous life in the eyes of God, and He will take care of my grade, right? And then what happens after the exam? You go back to who you are. It doesn't change the person that you are. You're just seeking a certain result. And that's why Jesus comes here to Bethesda, to the pool, with no regard for this man's faith, because He wants to throw us all off. He wants us to think that, yeah, you think that faith is what it takes for you to be made whole? No, I will change the story on you now. I will make this man whole who had no inclination of who I even am. So 2 examples from that story of 2 people who were made whole from their faith. And it often might not look the way we want it to look. And that's why we fear. Let's take, for example, a toothache. Going back to our teeth. I don't know why. But we take a toothache. And a toothache would be the reason to get you into a dental office. But the toothache is not the actual issue that needs to be solved. There are so many other issues, underlying issues, that are a result of the toothache. Correct? It could be a decaying tooth, it could be a cavity, it could be so many different things that I don't know. But the toothache is not, they don't come in and say, well, your toothache is fixed, the issue was a toothache. No, it was so many different other things. It's not what we actually think it is. And God is saying to us that He's changing the equation constantly in our lives of what healing would look like. It might not follow a certain equation, but we have to be ready and willing with a heart to be able to be open to change. And the interesting part is, within our self-pity, it's not just self-pity, but we also have self-pride. I was thinking of the story of Naaman in 2 Kings, verse 5, 8 to 14. I'm not going to turn there because I'm sure many of us know the story. And Elijah sends Naaman to go bathe in the Jordan River. He says, go bathe in this river and you'll be cleansed, you'll be healed. And what was his reaction? What? The Jordan River is the most unclean river of them all. I'm sure there are many other rivers that I could go to be cleansed, to be healed. Right? Naaman had this pride about him, that this wasn't how it was going to go down. He did not want to go to the Jordan River. He wanted to go to one of the other rivers, the more clean rivers. And he had this self-pride. So in this story we see there's self-pity, there's self-pride. We have this pride. I have this pride about me that I don't need to be healed the way God wants me to be healed. I don't need to be changed the way God wants me to be changed. But I have this idea of how I want to be changed. And henceforth, if it doesn't happen the way I need it to happen, it's not going to happen at all. And so we have this fear of change, which comes from our pity and with our pride. But not only that, not only do we have a need and a fear, but we have our hope to be made whole. And Jesus offers this man a very unusual opportunity. And he did not discuss anything about the pool. He did not tell him anything about, well, let me help you get down there. He's trying to show this man that he himself is the pool. He is the need for healing. Many of us, myself included, we look into other things for our healing, for our change. We might take our change to work. We might say our work needs to get better. Our careers need to be more successful in order for me to change. We might say that our family life needs to get better. Our family life needs to improve for us to change. We might say that money is necessary. We might say that, even in my case, that sports and athletics are necessary for me to change. But Jesus is coming to this man and he's saying to him, get up, pick up your mat and walk. He had a choice that he could listen and do it, or he could stay in his state and not have a hope at all. And as we look to the concept of hope, and that hope gives us an idea of something to look forward to. And as you think and ponder upon your areas of brokenness and your areas that need change, where does your hope come from? Where is your hope rooted in? Who is your hope rooted in? That you could seek out the change that you need. Often when I come back, I can have good conversations and catch up with many people. And I didn't tell him I'm going to share this story, but I will anyways. Godly uncle is, to me, physically a very broken man. And I asked him last time when I came, I said, Godly uncle, how are you broken now? What are you dealing with? Because sometimes it's an elbow, sometimes it's a finger. He's always dealing with some different type of ailment. And we all know this. We've been praying for him many years. And he said, you know what? I'm actually okay now. For once, I'm actually okay. I had to put down the tools. I can't do my crazy ideas anymore. But I'm actually okay. And he realized that the lesson I learned was that he realized where his problems were coming from. And that he needed to put down his tools. Because he knew and had a hope that if he would do that he would be made whole and he would be fully physically ready to go, which he is. Praise God. And it's amazing that when we think of where our hope is lying, and where our hope comes from, that this man was sitting here for 38 years. Do you think he had any hope of being made whole? Probably not. If we've been dealing with something for that long, that's longer than I've been alive for. But that in the areas that we need to change, and now, don't get me wrong, change continues to happen our entire life. It's for those who are young and for those who are old. I'm not excluding anyone from this, but change is constantly necessary. But where are we going to find that change? And now there's a couple different examples, and I was thinking about the church and coming here because I know there's a certain level of healing that we can have from being here with God's people. And many of us work in a hospital situation. Some of us, I don't work anywhere in the medical field. My wife does. So she comes home and talks about all the medical things, and I don't know what she's talking about. But many of you do. We have many nurses and things like that here. But the church is very similar to a hospital in many regards, in that all of us who are here are in this hospital, in this place, looking for healing. Now, some of us are in critical care. Some of us are in the ER. And the critical care unit addresses people who need intensive care, and the unit for most seriously diagnosed patients. Now, some of us come in here, or some of us find churches that we can go to where we need instant healing from God. And that's critical care, which we can find in God, with God's people. Some of us are in triage. Some of us are looking for what is wrong. We're trying to figure out what the problem is to help us diagnose the area that we need healing in. Some of us are just in a clinic. In the clinic, we are constantly dealing with a certain issue that needs to be addressed in the long term. And maybe you've identified that issue today that needs to be addressed as we're here in this clinic. Some of us are in a hospice. We're waiting to go home, right? We're here needing healing, constantly reviving our bodies and our spiritual minds, waiting for the Lord to call us. And some of us are here looking for the pharmacy. We're in need of medication. We're in need of constant medication to keep us going. And the man that we see here didn't go to a hospital. He didn't go to a physician. He didn't go anywhere but to the pool where he thought that there was a hope for him to be healed. And it is an amazing story to actually look and see that Jesus doesn't address his exact issue. He simply tells him, do you want to be healed? Do you want to be healed? And my hope and prayer is that as we identify the areas in our life that need healing, that we can surrender it to God, because as we come down over John chapter 5, in verse 14 it says, afterward Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, see, you are well, sin no more, that nothing worse may happen to you. And Jesus tells him, in the end, you are well. You are well. And the way to stay well is to not sin. Now, we don't know, again, we don't know what the cause was for his infirmity, for him being invalid. We don't know. But we do know the advice that Jesus gives to him to be whole, to stay that way, is to stay away from sin. And now, as you think and ponder upon your brokenness, the real issue is with change. Are you sitting in a state of self-pity, where you're pitying yourself that I've been this way for so long, I cannot change now? That it is impossible for anything to happen to me. That I need to change the way I am, but it's too hard. It's too hard. Or are you struggling with self-pride? That I don't need to change, that he's not talking to me, that God is not speaking to me, he's speaking to my children, or he's speaking to the person in front of me. Is it pride that we're struggling with, that is not allowing us to actually come forth and bring change into our life? Is it a matter of surrender, that we're unable to surrender ourselves and our lives to God, to actually give him the keys to the car that we drive and say, take us, change us, make us different, make us new? Or are we comfortable with who we are? Are we comfortable the same way that this man was comfortable for 38 years? He was comfortable. That when Jesus asked him, do you want to be healed? A simple yes or no question. He didn't answer with a yes or no. He gave an excuse. Are we giving excuses? Just things to think about. Probably haven't told any of you anything new. I haven't told you anything you've never heard before. Because I'm sure this is all things that we all know. However, it is things that we need to be reminded of. That at any age, at any place in life, at any circumstance, God is looking, seeking for us to change. Really looking for us to change something about us. And I always like to say this, I don't necessarily always do it. But it is always better to seek the change that you need in your life by yourself before God has to do it for you. Because when God has to put you through something to change you, it won't be fun. The same way he wrestled with Jacob. He wrestled and wrestled with Jacob. And so he twisted him up and changed him forever. Now we can go through that. We can go through the hard time, or we can invite the change that we need. I think of Paul often. And when he had the thorn in his flesh, and I've mentioned this before as well, but the thorn in his flesh, and he says that for this one thing I besought the Lord that he would heal me. That one thing brought Paul to his knees constantly, brought Paul to his knees daily, hourly, that God would heal him and touch him. That one thing. My question to you today is, what is your one thing? What is the thorn in your flesh? What is the one thing God has given you? Now, it might be, for some of you, a physical thing. Many of you know that I have a struggle with my vision in my eyes. You've been praying for me for many years. Some of you, it might be an emotional thing. It might be a mental struggle. It might be your family. It might be your finances. It might be your career. For children, it might be school. It might be your career path. It might be marriage. What is your one thing that God is calling you to bring you to your knees? Now, we could be so close to the solution. We could be so close, as this man was at the pool. He was so close, not realizing that his solution was right next to him. Now, a few years ago, as my eye situation was being figured out, I had a really bad day with my eyes, and I decided to go to my left eye turned really pink, and I went to the walk-in clinic to see my walk-in doctor, and he took a flashlight, he shone it on my eyes, and he said, "Oh yeah, you have pink eye." Nothing else. No other diagnostics, no other testing, no other procedures. He looked at me and simply said, "You have pink eye." I said, okay. He prescribed some eye drops, told me to stay away from people for the rest of my life until this is healed. So I sat in my basement away from my parents for a week in darkness, and it was not healing itself. It was not getting better until I decided, let me go see an eye doctor to get the solution, to see if they could identify the problem. And I went to the eye doctor. He put his big machine in front of me, took one look at my eyes. He told me to put my head back. I put my head back like this. He opened up my eyelids and pulled out a contact lens that was stuck in my eye for 2 weeks. Now, it is a disgusting story, and I apologize. But my point is this, that he was upset with me that I went to the walk-in clinic instead of the eye doctor for a solution to my problem. My solution could have come a lot sooner had I realized that the solution to my problems could be found in the person who had the ability to solve my problem. He had the machinery. He had the 8 years of education, specifically dealing with the eye, that he could have pulled it out in seconds, and I would not have had any issues. Now, since then, it left some scarring on my eye, unfortunately. But he was upset with me in the fact that I went to my walk-in clinic as opposed to my eye doctor or an eye issue. And he was right. And as we look at this man here, and he's so close to his solution. He's right next to his Savior, his healer. But he is so focused on this pool. This pool represents the walking clinic. Jesus represents the eye doctor. In my eyes, that's my story. How many of you are so close to your solution? You're so close to Jesus, but your eyes are fixed somewhere else. That we think that our change, our wholeness can come from a different place than that of Jesus. And so my question to you again is, what is your one thing? And do you want to be made whole? Let's pray. Dear Lord God, and our loving Heavenly Father,